I think there's a ton of hope for humanity. And I think there's a ton of hope for kids and our future, and for me and my family and us. And people who think like us, James. I think there's no hope with the government that we're ever going to be able to reconcile these types of things. And going back to my point before about them just turning around and apologizing for what they've done, I just don't think that there's anything going to be like that. So I think that we're going to have some type of a succession, some type of a breakaway, separate communities. People just go their own way and just start fresh. And we have the options, we have the technology, we have everything that we can do. It's just putting things into place. And there's communities that are popping up all over the world.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another Borderless Podcast. This is James Guzman, and today is going to be a really good one. I talked to Mikkel Thorup from the Expat Money Show. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that show. Very similar to the Borderless Podcast. He talks about living internationally, making money internationally, online income, all that kind of thing. We talked about birth tourism. He just took part in birth tourism in Brazil, and he's looked into that in other places, which is basically strategically having a child, keeping in mind the residency and citizenship aspect. So we talked a little bit about that. He's been in several countries the last year or two, Panama, Costa Rica, Mexico, the United States, Brazil. We talked about how that's been in the time of COVID and what that's been like. We also talked for a little while about online income and investments. And finally, we talked a little bit about him traveling with his children. He has 2 children. And so how he sees that as a motivation rather than something that holds him back from traveling. So we talked about how he did that and how he recommends other people think about educating and traveling with their families. So we're going to jump into that. But first, I want to talk about a sponsor of the show, and that is BorderlessHealthInsurance.com. BorderlessHealthInsurance.com is for people that are expats or digital nomads. I shared an image the other day on social media, and we're getting in these actuaries from 2020 about some of the insurance companies and their highest payouts. And a lot of people were really amazed at the amount that you can really rack up, even in Latin American countries. The top one is from Nicaragua, $1.9 million for lung cancer. Costa Rica, $1.6 million for pancreatic cancer. And it goes all the way from $578,000. If you're just listening to the podcast, then you won't be able to see it, but I'll throw this up on the video. But these are from a big company that I work with. So, just to keep that in mind, usually one of the great parts about being an expat is that you can pay for everything out of pocket. But there are some big downside risks that you want to keep from happening to you, and you want to have access to. How it usually works is they have private hospitals, but you have to show that you have insurance. You don't want to be one of these people that are stuck down here and they can't pay for going to a hospital, and so they end up setting up a GoFundMe, borrowing from friends and family, knowing that they probably won't be able to pay it back. Bad situation. So it's very low premiums that you can get, and that'll just save you from real catastrophic stuff. So go to BorderlessHealthInsurance.com, get more information, schedule an appointment, and we'd be happy to talk to you. Now let's jump into the interview, and here we go. Borderless. All right, Mikkel, how you doing?
Good, man. Excited to be here. Very excited to be here.
Yeah. I don't know why. I've been on yours for a while ago, and then we were talking over email, and I was like, I never had Mikkel on. So
we've been on panels together. We've done lots of things, and it was like, crap, I haven't been on his show yet. Figure that out.
Yeah. So, well, maybe we could start first. I think that a lot of people will already know about you, so we don't need to get into too much in depth about you and your store. But maybe you just want to give a brief introduction about you and your show and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Mikkel Thorup. I am the host of the Expat Money Show podcast. I was running the largest and oldest offshore website in the world for several years But now I'm back out on my own, doing my own podcast, doing coaching and consulting and lots of other fun things in the offshore space. But yeah, I've been traveling for 21 years as an expat. Wrote a #1 best-selling book about it called Expat Secrets. This is my life every day on the personal side and on the business side. And yeah, I'm excited for today's conversation. Should be good.
Cool. Great. Yeah. And people, if you are into the Borderless podcast, then you'd be into his show as well. Very similar topics and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
very.
So you are in Brazil, right? Where are you in Brazil?
Okay. So at the moment I'm in Florianopolis. I'm in the island in the south of Brazil. And my wife and I came here about 4 or 5 months ago, and we decided to give birth in Brazil. So I'm Canadian with Danish heritage. My wife is from China. Our first child was born in the UAE, and then we decided for our second child, we would give birth here in Brazil. So normally we live in Panama, but we already have a residency in Panama, and that's normal, and we're working on our citizenship there. So with Brazil, if you give birth in Brazil, the child is automatically a Brazilian citizen. And then as the legal guardian of a Brazilian citizen, we automatically get our permanent residency. They say automatically. I mean, you still have to do your paperwork and they have to still do due diligence and things like this on you. But it is a good option, I think. During the pandemic, things are super slow and bureaucratic work is difficult at best. Doing it during COVID was kind of a tricky thing, you could say. We were not, I'm a bit surprised with how much extra paperwork and how much extra stuff has to go into this. Even after doing this, I mean, Brazil's the 9th country I've lived in. I'm still shocked with how this is going. But yeah, we can get into all that and birth tourism and all the interesting stories about being down here.
Yeah, birth tourism is something that, people that are thinking internationally, that's something else to need to look into. A lot of people like to do that here in Mexico as well. Do you know some other places? I know you've looked a lot into this with some other countries that, going there to have a child is a good way to go.
Yeah, it's usually the countries in the Americas where you can do things like birth tourism. In Europe, you can pretty much forget about it. They follow the blood. They don't follow the soil. So if you are a parent and you have a child and you're from Ireland or something like that, then the child's automatically going to get. But if you want to just fly over to Ireland and give birth there, then you won't. Most countries in the Americas, you can do this. The added benefit of Brazil and Mexico is that the parents can actually get permanent residency through what's called a family reunification visa. At least that's what it's called here in Brazil. So after we get our permanent residency, we actually get a shortcut to citizenship. So it's 2 years and you actually get passport in hand. Now, you need to show a language test and some proficiency and, a couple of other strong ties here. But if you actually move down to the country, you'll get your citizenship within 2 years, which is super, super, super fast. I have heard of some programs in Portugal where if you're already a permanent resident there and you give birth there, then the child will automatically become a Portuguese citizen. So that's another option. I learned about that one afterwards. So you would either go in under the golden visa or the D7 visa as like true blue immigration. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So is that like, what they call anchor baby? Is that the same thing? Have you ever heard the term?
That is absolutely an anchor baby. I think it's kind of like a derogatory term, but I like the term. I think it's all right. I'm not offended.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's cool, man. And Brazil, well, both Brazil and Mexico are very, they're pretty strong passports. So that's going to be great. How many passports do you have now?
I have one passport. I'm working on 3 others at the moment. So I'm different pieces through. Part of my expat journey was I was in the Middle East for 8 years, and those countries, pretty much impossible to get a second citizenship there. So, I mean, the UAE where I was, they have introduced new programs it's in the news now that you could become a citizen. But the chances of you actually getting it, I mean, are slim to none, and it hasn't been tested yet. I think a lot of it is just media attention. Places like Dubai are excellent at grabbing media hype about everything that they can about their country to try to attract people. And so they should. I think it's a great place. But yeah, 8 years there did not lead to citizenship. I was 3 years in Australia. I was on my way to citizenship there. I didn't stay there long enough. I ended up moving on, and then where else was I? Singapore, New Zealand, a few other places. But it's always been for like 1-2 years. So, but at the moment, we're working on 3 more passports, so it should be good.
Great, yeah. One thing that has been made apparent through this whole COVID situation is the need to get some sort of residency or citizenship, something like that, so that you have another option. A lot of countries just shut down overnight anybody that's not a resident or citizen. So that's something to think about if you think that you might want a plan B. Not just do you need a place that you like to go and maybe a house or something, but you should also make sure you have at least a residency, because who knows what's coming down the pike here. Here in Mexico, luckily they never did that, so it's always been open. But you never know. Again, you never know, the regime could change. That's one of the really unfortunate things that we're living through right now, is we're kind of beholden to these politicians and governments so much, because they've just taken so much power, and who knows if we'll ever get any freedom back. But so unfortunately we have to go where the politicians are not like really crazy, with all the restrictions, and if they'll let us in or not, you know what I mean? But
I mean, that's why I'm here. I mean, it's another reason. Brazil, where I am, is wide open at the moment. I mean, yeah, you got people wearing masks on the street and stuff, but all the restaurants, all the bars, the malls, the cinemas, everything, it's all wide open. Like in the last year and a half, I've been in Panama, Costa Rica, Mexico, and Brazil. Well, I went to the States for a little bit as well, but I mean, I tried to spend my time in the countries which were the most open and the most free. And yeah, Costa Rica was quite good. Brazil's very good. Mexico's excellent. Mexico's a beautiful place. And I mean, you're still in Mexico, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've been here over 10 years, so I have no plans on leaving. Now I think that with Costa Rica and Brazil, they're both pretty open, but with both of those, you need to get a test, right? Oh, I guess the US too.
Well, okay. So Costa Rica, you don't need to get a test. Costa Rica, you have to have insurance when you go into the country. I was there in February, so things may have changed in the last couple of months. But when I was there in February for 3 weeks, there was no need to get a test to enter the country, but you had to have insurance. But the insurance was not just the normal insurance that we would think of as travel insurance. It actually had to have a clause in there that if you got sick from COVID, the insurance would pay for your hotel stay for the amount of time. And it needed to be at least like $2,000 or something like this. But the funny thing was that you could actually, when you got the insurance, you could get the deductible so high that the insurance was almost free. Because I wasn't actually worried about going there and getting sick. First of all, I have platinum healthcare, and I mean, I travel with it anyways. But it doesn't have this extra little piece, the hotel. So I think I ended up paying like $45 for a family of 3 for 3 weeks of insurance coverage. But my deductible was like $10,000 or $5,000 or something like this. So it was ridiculous. And then besides that, I think it was just a health declaration that we needed to fill in beforehand. Now, as for Brazil, when we came here, we had to have a PCR test, which was not a fun experience at all. Panama is a rapid test you do at the airport, and it's easy breezy. I mean, the most difficult part is just standing in line and waiting. The rest of it's just super fast.
Is that the one where it's just like kind of like the side of your nose?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's very, very gentle. I'm not saying I like it. I'm not saying I want to get it, but compared to the PCR, it's a walk in the park. The PCR is freaking lobotomizing you, at least the way that I got it. She had me sit in a chair, so I couldn't actually like move away or anything like that. So when she rammed it in my nose, I had like tears running down the side of my face. I actually had to push her hand away. And she's so shocked, like, why? What's wrong with you? I'm like, you're tickling my spine through my nose. Like, get out of here.
God.
I don't like that at all. But yeah, all of this stuff for entering countries is the pain. But once you get in the country, it's considerably better.
And what about the U.S.?
Well, when I went to the U.S., there was nothing at that time. I flew into Florida, and then once I was in the country, there was nothing. That was last November. So it's been a few months. We were in Vegas. I was speaker at an offshore conference there and just went in for a week. And it was pretty straightforward. It was funny, though. The flight from Panama to the U.S. was empty. I had like 50 seats to myself. And then from Florida to Vegas was chock-a-block. Like not one seat open on the whole aircraft. And they're still doing the social distancing in lineups going into the aircraft. And it's like, don't you guys realize how like silly this is? I mean, we're all going to breathe recycled air in about 4 minutes here. And you're worried that there's not 5 feet between us or 6 feet between us? Come on.
Yeah, it's all theater. I haven't been back in the States for a while. I know that they were. I don't know all the details, but pretty sure that some of the airplanes going in, they require a test. I've heard of people like just faking them, and I've heard people just do the one you were talking about, the rapid test. Also, if you really don't want to go through any of that stuff, you can always just drive through Mexico. I mean, that border has been pretty open. With all those places that you've been, what are some places that you would actually recommend, right now that people are, if they're considering, leaving the U.S. or something like that, out of just the places you've been lately?
Well, Panama has a great option for the residency. Unfortunately, they've just canceled it. It's actually finishing up August 18th, I think is the last official date. I think the published date is August 5th. But I have people I work with who have actually been down and spoke to immigration, and they said, no, they'll take applications till the 18th. Panama is good. I mean, we had pretty strict lockdowns during last year, but now the country is wide open. My mother and my daughter are still in Panama. So I do get like the daily updates, and they've been open for a while, which I'm glad to see. Brazil, I would recommend. I mean, we were in Rio for a week, and we were the only people at all of the tourist sites. Like, we went and saw Christ the Redeemer, and I mean, there was probably about 20 of us there. And when I went like 5 years ago, there was probably 20,000 people there on one day. So, I mean, you get to see these world-class tourist attractions more or less by yourself. And it's really sad because there's huge amounts of people who actually derive their income from helping tourists, tour guides, things like this, bus operators. And they're doing nothing now. I mean, they're sitting at home. They're so happy to be able to show you around. So when me and my wife were in Rio, we got a day tour. It was just the pair of us. And we were talking to the guy. He's like, yeah, I used to do 2 trips a day. We're like, how many are you doing now? He's about 1 a month, maybe 2 a month. It's like crazy. And I mean, he's a father and a husband, and he provides for his family. So I'm not a big one for charity by any means, but I do believe in driving the economy by spending my dollars in something that I want to exchange value for. And for this instance, it was excellent value. I mean, my money for him driving me around, explaining the sites, translating things, taking care of us, that's the way it should be. So I really like that. Costa Rica was wide open also. I mean, nobody is wearing a mask there. Or if they are, it's like theater, as you had said.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you go in the boats or the docks or the tourist sites or anything like that, the masks come off. The guide's the first one to take the mask off. They just do it in front of the police officers, and that's about it. But yeah, those have been kind of my experiences through COVID, through traveling. And
where'd you go in Mexico?
I'm glad that I'm out here. I was at in Acapulco last year, and at your favorite person's event, who I won't mention.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I lived in Acapulco for over 2 years, so yeah, I'm not a big fan of that place, but it could be all right. You know, like vacation. There's some all inclusives or whatever that are okay.
Yeah. The beach was pretty. I enjoyed highly enjoyed the nature there. That was for sure.
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. Absolutely beautiful sunsets. No matter what happens, that bay and the sunset, that can never go away. So, but a lot of people go there for several reasons. But there's actually, there's just so many great beaches in Mexico. I just don't prefer it. Well, that's good. So, I always try to ask people like you that have successfully, lived an international life. One of the biggest, I talk to a lot of people that, for some reason, I've been talking about this for 10 years, trying to get people to get online income and get out of the States. And I still get people that, they're like just scrambling now, for the latest thing. This isn't something that I've started just because of COVID. This is a symptom of a collapsing empire, guys. Okay. So this is, there's going to continue to be bad things coming down the road and all this. So you need to start thinking about it. You need to start thinking about a plan B, internationalizing, going with your assets and all this type of stuff. And I say all that to say, I have all these people that always contact me, and I'm sure you do too, because you do consultations. And now they're scrambling to try to get some online income. That's because that's kind of the first step, right? The first step is to try to, how am I going to pay for things? Because, I also tell people don't come down to, Mexico specifically. I don't know, maybe some other places in Latin America, but don't come to Mexico and try to get a job. It's not going to be a good plan, because you are going to be just so amazed at how low wages are. Okay. So the idea is to get online income, and then you could start planning, or, a passive income as well, things like that. So I say all that just to ask you, what have you seen as, people that contact you or other, people that have, people what's been some successful ways that people have used to get some online income like that lately?
Well, we're actually doing a webinar about generating an online income for English teachers. I think that this is a really good option for a lot of people, but I think that so many people don't really do a great job of it. Maybe they just try to go in and get normal students. There are ways to teach English and earn a lot of money, where you are able to charge $50, $60, $70, $100 an hour for it. But you have to be very purposeful about it. And it's about using other things in your life. So if you have a degree, let's say I don't know, pick any type of a degree. You were a scientist or something like that. And you figure out there's no way I'm going to be able to do my type of job online. What we're seeing is actually, if you teach English, but you use it as a speciality for like teaching English to people who need to be able to do presentations in the United States. So you get Japanese clients or Chinese clients, and they want to speak internationally. They will spend massive amounts of money on these types of things. If you're just trying to get a client and you're going to be teaching 9-year-old kids or something like that to middle income families, well, then there's no way. So we're doing a webinar this week on that one. I think that that'll be a lot of fun. If you guys go to expatmoneyshow.com, you'll find more information on there. I think that a lot of the other people who come to me, they've got questions about drop shipping or Amazon FBA. I mean, lots of people do these types of online businesses. It's not something that I really have any experience with, so I don't coach people on the business side for these types of things. I do more on the structuring side, on the tax planning, on the residencies. I mean, the residencies and the citizenship are the things that I really know and care the most about. And I think that a lot of the people who come to me already have some type of an online income or have some type of a job that they can now do remote. So they're looking for what the next step is, where I'm not a business coach. That's just not what I want to do. And it's not that those things aren't good. I mean, they're excellent, but there's so many great people out there who are just way better at it than I am, that I'm not going to try to compete with those people. I'm always going to try to do the things that make sense for me, and I have the most amount of experience with. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, sure. So that's a good option that you said about English. I was just thinking, I know a guy that is in Querétaro. So Querétaro is about 45 minutes to an hour away from where I am. And it's a pretty big city in Mexico, central Mexico. And he started teaching regular English. They have academies here. You can teach regular English. And then he had a business degree and he started teaching business English. I'm not sure how he went about getting the clients, but he started teaching business classes with, the businesses would pay to have him teach them, business English. And he was doing pretty well. And then he was even telling me he had like CEOs and, people like that needed one-on-one type of stuff. And so he would like go to their house and teach them one-on-one, and they would pay him a lot of money. So, that's kind of interesting. That's a good option. I'm not sure how you go about getting clients, but that's good.
Well, we're doing a webinar. So one of my really good friends, his name's Ollie Richards. If people follow my stuff, they know I've done tons of work with him before. And I followed his classes to learn second languages. And so he has a really good method for getting new students and how to set it up and how to write the emails. And he does the templates and everything like that. I think it's a really good system. I've never been an English teacher in my life. I mean, I'm a dyslexic who dropped out of school when I was 12 years old. You probably don't want me teaching you English. But I do think that for someone who wants to make an income online very, very fast so that you can go out there and travel, I think this is a really cool option. So I'm really excited to learn more about how he proposes to do this. Should be neat.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. All right. So say that somebody has got that, there are people that have, like you said, Amazon FBA. I think it's pretty competitive at this point. That it's really hard to be getting into Amazon FBA right now, unless you have some really unique product or something. But I know a lot of people do that. Because English, whatever. So say that you have that, maybe you're retired, you got your pension now. So you've got something like that. You said that most of the consulting you do is after that. So somebody that already has income. So once they have that, what should they do? Like what kind of assets or structuring do you recommend someone if they want to, say somebody in Canada or the US, they got all their money maybe in the stock market, and now they're looking at doing a little internationalization. What's kind of some of the first steps that you think they should take?
So from the Canadian side in most places in the world, it's so simple. If you want to legally reduce your taxes, it's kind of a 3-step process. It's get a residency somewhere else, then tell your government that you're leaving, have a deemed disposition, sell any of your stuff, pay any appropriate taxes that are owed on those things, and then leave. And once you've declared yourself a non-resident of your country, in most instances, that's enough. So you can be a Brit or a French or a German or a Canadian, Australian. You can live in another country in a tax-free zone. And as long as you've followed the steps and you've paid your appropriate taxes that are owed to the government, you're not going to owe them anything else afterwards. The United States is a completely different story. The IRS is going to follow you everywhere in the world, no matter where you live. So the first strategy that most people put into place with their taxes side is the foreign earned income exclusion, which I'm sure you know very well and have probably talked about lots on this show. And that's because it works. I mean, being able to shelter $108,700 as of the time of this recording is pretty solid deduction. And now if you have a spouse and your spouse is also an American citizen, then it's a doubling effect. And if you're filing jointly, then you can actually exclude the first, I don't know, say 180,000, for example, of yours and 40,000 from your spouse's. So it doesn't have to be an equal balance either. And if you move down to a place like Panama, which follows a territorial tax system, you're earning your money outside of Panama. So you don't have a store here or a barber or a restaurateur or something like that, but you earn your money online, like the examples we gave earlier. Well, then Panama has no claim to your taxes. So now we've taken care of your federal income tax in the United States and your local tax in Panama, for example. And then I guess the only thing that's left is your state tax. So if you're an American citizen, just make sure that that state tax is not going to follow you. So if you're originally from California, you probably want to move to Florida or Texas or something like that first and get rid of any ties to California. I mean, change over your driver's license, get a new apartment, register to vote, library card, gym membership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Show strong ties for 6 months, a year, something like that, to Florida before you make the move, and you won't be responsible for paying any state taxes as well. Now, I'm not giving you guys individual tax advice. I'm just talking in absolute general terms here. But these would be the types of things that we would look at the very beginning. If you want to legally reduce your taxes, there are still strategies out there, even for Americans. And yeah, I mean, after 220,000 of a married couple, we're going to have to look at some additional strategies. But right off the bat, I mean, that's a good amount. And I think you'd agree with me. Living in Mexico or Costa Rica or Panama and earning 220 tax-free, you are going to be in the upper echelons of society. You're going to have a new vehicle, you're going to have a nice home, you're going to be having restaurant meals. I mean, you have a lot of opportunity there that just you probably wouldn't have back in your home country. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I have a step-by-step guide. It was actually originally written by Johnny FD on my blog about how to move your residence from Texas to from California to Texas that I put on there years ago. So yeah, if people are
Johnny's
interested,
a good guy. I've been on his podcast twice, and he's been on my podcast once.
Yeah. Oh man, I had him on years and years ago. But I went to his conference a couple years ago in Cancun. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, there's a step-by-step guide on Borderless blogs. If you go there, maybe you type in Texas to Florida, California to Texas or something like that, then it should come up if you want something more step-by-step. So yeah, so that's great. And that's how, you want to get started. That's kind of the basics. And now how about you, like yourself, if you're, people are now, as far as the macro investments, trying to figure out what the hell's going on in the market and the globe right now. What are some things like that you yourself or that you recommend people as far as putting their money in? I mean, are you like a conservative? I don't know, like index funds.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm pretty libertarian, so I follow an Austrian school of economics. I like sound money. There's no secret about that. I mean, I own gold and silver and have for years. I hold them in offshore vaults. I mean, that's well understood. I am a big proponent for Bitcoin. I do think that it really is going to be the future. I mean, once you really start to understand the economics of it, it certainly makes sense in my mind. And then foreign real estate. I mean, I don't think that someone should just jump on an airplane and go out there and buy foreign real estate tomorrow, your chances of getting scammed are pretty high. But I do think that there is a lot of value if you have a home in a foreign country, especially if you have a residency to live there. I mean, that for me is just personal responsibility. I don't think that you need to take every single dollar you have and try to get it out of US dollars as fast as possible. I mean, I do have people all the time who are like, oh, I'm thinking about getting a place in Panama, but it's in US dollars, so that scares me. Like, well, if US dollars scare you in Panama, like, welcome to Argentine pesos or Guatemalan quetzales or some of these other Latin American currencies. I mean, those are super risky, and I'd be very, very concerned about them being destabilized. You know, I think that if you have some type of a portfolio where you're holding precious metals, a bit of Bitcoin, and some foreign real estate, and then keeping the rest in some cash, some dry powder on the side, I think that's just smart at the moment. I mean, yeah, I hold Swiss francs. I hold Swiss francs in an overseas account. I think that's a good idea. But good old US dollars at the moment, being able to scoop things up for cheap. I mean, there's a lot to be said for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had Greg Gregerson, I think it's Greg Gregerson, years ago on, and I think you had a podcast with him as well. I think you went over there. I saw some pictures where you checked out his facilities.
Long time ago.
You still recommend that? You still use the services? Recommend him?
Silver Bullion. I mean, I don't work directly with them, but I've been over. They're great guys, very trustworthy. Gregor is as solid as they come. I work now with a vault in Panama. They're awesome guys. They live just down the street from me. Well, not down the street, maybe 20 minutes from my house. And I've been out to their facility many times, and they're really good. I think anywhere where you can have a private vault, not associated with the banking sector, in a country that has really strong laws, and you can actually go in and see the facilities, meet the people involved, take a look at what the insurance program is like, who is the underwriter, I think you're going to be quite well off. Cayman Islands has some really good ones as well. I've toured the vaults in the UAE, in Germany, in Austria, and Switzerland, in lots of different countries. I was not overly impressed with facilities in Europe. I found a lot of the things really, really old and quite dated, it seemed to me. But I mean, that is a brand. When you hold it in Austria or you hold it in Switzerland, that's a brand. You're paying for that as much as anything else. It's difficult for some of these new vaults to get a lot of traction. Panama is not the first place that people think of for holding precious metals. Singapore has done a great job of changing their perspective, considering the country is only, 50 years old or something like that. And before that, it was just a hole in the ground. It was just a swamp. But I think that even if you want, you can diversify. You can have in a couple of different places. Because usually the way that you're paying on any of these is a percentage of the metal value. So if you're doing allocated service, then, and you have $100,000 in one and $100,000 in the other, actually, it's not going to cost you any more. Now, if you have safety deposit boxes in each, then that might. But with safety deposit boxes, there's so many other advantages. So it's kind of like a mix and match for your situation, what's going to work best for you. There's no right answer on this one.
So allocated is the way to go, right?
Yeah, 100% allocated and safety deposit box. Definitely.
What do you think? Well, I'm sure you've looked at the Sprott. Sprott seems like a decent option. The Sprott.
I've looked at them, but I've never worked with them. What's your experience been? Have you done any stuff with them?
They run the biggest fund. I mean, you have to be an accredited investor But yeah, they have some really great options. If you don't want to do the allocated thing, they have other options, and they have ways that it can be more tax optimal. The thing with allocated is that you have to pay a storage fee. So some people don't like that. But anyways, okay.
Mint
Well, that's
does a
cool.
good program as well for their paper gold.
Who's that?
Perth Mint out
Perth
of
Mint,
Australia.
Yeah.
They do some really good
I don't know if you've
programs
seen
as well.
this, but I don't know if you've seen this, but lately there's been people upset because they wanted delivery of their silver, and it's been taking a long time. But I mean, this is something that's happening all over the globe. So I mean, if you have unallocated precious metals, then just be prepared that you're not paying a storage fee, but it could take a long time to get it. So
I think that there's going to come out that there's a lot of fraud. I'm not going to mention any companies, but I think they've been over-promising and they've not been holding what they said that they were in a lot of instances. I mean, I've read lots of things coming out of London and stuff, and then there's all the problems with like the GLD and the SLV and these ETFs, and that are supposed to hold certain amounts, and I think we're going to see a lot of problems coming forwards as people want to take possession of their metals. So.
Yeah. They started this silver squeeze thing. They were trying to do a similar thing to the silver market that, Wall Street Bets did to these meme stocks. But I mean,
which was hilarious to watch, by the way.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but man, the whole entire silver market, I mean, that's a whole nother animal. But they have been doing a lot of kind of exposing of things that have been in this market for a long time that we've known that there's a lot of manipulation in the precious metals markets through all kinds of different things. And they're able to kind of smash down momentum when it ever comes on. And it sounds, you mention it to a mainstream finance person that, they say that's a conspiracy theory or something, but there's a lot of stuff, a lot of things that people have been exposing for a long time. And so we'll see. But
just look at the spot price of silver to what you will actually pay for a coin. Try to go out there and get a Buffalo or a Liberty dollar or something like that. The premium is like $18 or something on a coin. Well, that's what the market will pay for it. So how can you tell me that the spot is $29, but I have to pay $46 for a coin or something like that?
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense.
For sure. And so, one thing, obviously, you and I, we've been looking at these things for a long time now. Honestly, I'm always honest about it. I mean, I was thinking that there would be a crash a lot longer ago than it has happened, right? So they've kept this thing going afloat for a long time now, and they're just printing bucket loads of money all the time, and it's just crazy. How do you see this all playing out internationally? That's how some people ask me how. So if they have all this inflation in the U.S., is that going to come out to the other countries more or less? How is this how do you see this playing out?
I mean, that's a good question, and I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to be able to give you the greatest insights here on this one. But for my understanding, they're exporting a lot of the inflation. I mean, they're selling their bonds, they're selling everything. So they print, but it's not really the US who's going to be suffering from it. They're trading their worthless US dollars for real things. They're trading it to China for manufactured goods, for chemicals, for building material, for anything and everything. And it's other countries that are going to be holding the bucket when the music stops. I mean, there's going to be no chair left for them. So I think that what is happening, and this also goes back to our conversation about precious metals, is countries like China know that they have to continually buy gold because it's the only thing that will actually hedge against the deflation of the US dollar. I mean, for me, in my life, in my personal side, I am stockpiling cash, Bitcoin, and precious metals. I am staying liquid, and with the more money I have, the more options I have. We're buying houses at the moment in a couple of different countries and securing plan B, plan C, plan D, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because I don't know, man. I just don't know what's going to happen in the world. I know I'm scared. Like, I'll be very honest. I mean, this is a mess right now. It's an absolute mess. And people who think that things are just going to go back to normal tomorrow or, in 6 months, I mean, you guys are deluding yourself. This stuff is never going back to normal. Or if it does, it's going to take 50 years. We're going to have a massive revolution and everything is going to change. But, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're a parent, I mean, take responsibility, get things in order now for your family, for yourself, and for your kids. Because otherwise, I mean, sticking your head in the sand is just not going to do anyone any good. When government takes control and power like this, they're never going to give it back. I mean, you're deluding yourself if you think that they will. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you kind of wake up to the idea that, we've been living in this, world that has the post World Wars kind of world. It was a completely different world than the pre World Wars world as far as freedoms and all that type of stuff. And, what's going on now is kind of like another world war where they're completely changing kind of the structure of, what people are willing to accept. So, yeah, I mean, it's the only way that things like this go back is through collapse or something like that. Or, politicians aren't going to give it away, just say, oh, okay, that's right. Everybody can go back to how it was. And,
yeah, they're not going to grow a conscience tomorrow and be like, hey, I know that we've destroyed your life and locked you in your house for breathing for the last 18 months. We're sorry. Here's all your freedom back. I mean, they're laughing at you right now. They're absolutely laughing at people. So, I mean, I'm no activist. Like, I'm not out there protesting on the street or banging pots and pans. I mean, it's just not my style. I create my content. I work with my private clients. I protect my family. And yeah, man, agricultural land, that's what we're looking at now, scooping up, 100 acres of agricultural land, getting a little place off the grid. That's what I'm thinking about. I think that's the way forward, and then ride this stuff out.
Yeah, cool. It sounds like very similar to my strategy, but I do not have children yet. So you have two now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
little girl, little boy.
All right, and so as you were mentioning, that's something. If you're a parent, this is something that's going. That's very important. So what about that? A lot that's holding a lot of people back. They say, well, I got a kid or like this. You're saying, well, that should be a motivation, not something that holds you back. So how do you go about handling that, whether it's school or, just raising them in general and different places, or what's your general outlook on raising a child like that?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, I dropped out of school when I was 12 years old. I had a pretty horrendous experience with public education. So there was just absolutely no way in hell that I would ever give my child to the educational system as we have it today. I mean, it's abusive and fraudulent, as my friend Michael likes to say. So we had already had the mindset that we were going to homeschool my daughter, and we do right now. I mean, she's 5 years old. She speaks fluent Spanish, Mandarin, and English. And we'll be working on a fourth language probably starting at the end of this year. And I believe more in interest-based learning for kids. I don't think that we need to have them memorizing what the longest river in the world is or trigonometry when we don't even teach them mathematics based around how money works or how to do your banking or anything like this. So we'll be designing our own educational programs. I am working with someone, it's not really going to announce it today, but we are working with someone where we'll be doing an international school online for expat families, for international families, as a solution to some of the problems that are normally found in international schools. So we're pretty excited about that. I don't know if it'll be ready for September. I hope it will. I hope it will. And I mean, if anybody's listening here today and you want to find out more, then shoot me a message at expatmoneyshow.com and I'll put you on a list, a mailing list. And then once we have more information, I can share that with you. But I'm working with some of the best educators in the United States, a guy who created, I think it was 30 Montessori schools over the last 25-year career in multiple states and does education in a very different way, very libertarian values. Although we won't call ourselves a libertarian school, it still has a lot of the libertarian values that are so dear to me. So from the education side, from the kids, I think that that's really important. Critical thinking, creative thought, entrepreneurship, personal responsibility, these types of things. And yeah, man, anything to do with the state these days, I can't even look at. It just gets worse and worse and worse every year for me. I become less trusting as I don't think I ever was very trusting of the state, but after what I've seen in the last year, I just think there's no hope. There's absolutely no hope.
Yeah, a lot of people are pretty black-pilled right now. I would probably put myself in the same boat. So now, do you worry about maybe, as your kids grow up, they'll have time fitting in somewhere or something like that? Or what? I know some people think about that.
I personally don't. And let me just rephrase my last sentence there when I said there's no hope. I think there's a ton of hope for humanity. And I think there's a ton of hope for kids in our future and for me and my family and us. I mean, and people who think like us, James. I think there's no hope with the government that we're ever going to be able to reconcile these types of things. And going back to my point before about them just turning around and apologizing for what they've done. I just don't think that there's anything going to be like that. So I think that we're going to have some type of a succession, some type of a breakaway, separate communities. I mean, people just go their own way and just start fresh. And we have the options, we have the technology, we have everything that we can do. It's just putting things into place. And there's communities that are popping up all over the world. Now, as for my kids fitting in with other kids, I mean, I think that communication is one of the most valuable things that a child can know and understand. Making friends. I mean, I'm always telling my kid, here, go and talk to strangers. Go and talk to this person. Go and talk to that person. Because I homeschool my kid doesn't mean that I shelter her. No, I push her out there and I want to expose her to anything and everything. Okay, I'm not going to tell her to go play in traffic or something like that. But short of that, I mean, she is always out there talking to new people. A massive book that had influence on my life was How to Win Friends and Influence People. I read that book 22 times. I will absolutely read that book with my kid and we will study it. And we will go through line by line and we'll discuss it. And she will understand how to build relationships in efficient and effective manners with other human beings. Those are things that are not taught in public education. They're just not. School, as I don't know if you've ever read any James Tallergato, but he talks about how the purpose of school is to alienate you from society, from the church, from your parents, and from yourself. And I truly believe that. I think that is the purpose of the educational system. So they're the ones who are doing things where their kids will not fit in. I mean, if you've ever spent time around kids who were homeschooled, you will see how brilliant and creative and outgoing and just wonderful human beings they are. Every time I talk to a homeschool child, I'm just shocked and awed and so pleasantly surprised. It's just amazing. And, obviously I'm very biased. I think my daughter is the best ever. Every daddy thinks that his little girl is the greatest little girl in the whole wide world. But yeah, I can objectively tell you at the same time, she is amazing. She's just so rad.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Trivium? Does that the trivium method? Oh,
No,
okay.
tell me.
Well, so they have the classics. This is what I studied. And really the only people that teach this now is Jesuit and other kind of religious have still kept it, but it's called classical education. The trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And it's basically how people used to learn. And it's grammar, meaning understanding how to label reality, logic, recognizing inconsistencies, and basically reconciling things in your own brain, and rhetoric, how to explain that to the outside world. And back in the day, people would learn that way, and then they would go become an apprentice when they're 14 or something like that, and that was it. And they were out in the world. And anyways, since you're putting that together, I'm a big proponent of the trivium method. So it's something to look into.
I will look into that. It sounds interesting.
Yeah. I did want to ask you, you've been all these different places. You mentioned some good places. So now, because of what happened in Panama, that's your main place that you live. And I know you've helped a lot of people get residencies there and stuff like that. I mean, do you still think that that's a good option, especially since they're shutting down this residency thing, and they've had such a they had in the past a strict lockdown? Is that somewhere you still recommend people to go?
Yeah, I think that if you have an opportunity to get the residency, if there is any time and you can get it, then get it, because I think it's an excellent residency to keep in your back pocket. As for Panama, for spending time in, yeah, I think it is still a good place. I mean, it is a very libertarian country. I don't know what happened with the Ministry of Health and why they decided that they should be locking people down. I mean, that's atrocious. It's wrong, full stop. I'm hoping that they will never do anything like this again, where they've learned their lesson. I have no idea. I am creating backup plans for myself. We're getting permanent residency right here. We're shopping for another house in Brazil, in Florianopolis at the moment. This will be another place. The problem is with Brazil, the bureaucracy and the terrible tax situation here. So it's kind of a hit and miss. We're looking at Mexico as well, picking up a residency there. Haven't started that yet, but I will be writing about it and talking about it as my experience goes through. I don't think that you can put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would say, Panama, full stop, best country, no questions asked. For a libertarian who wants some freedom in their life and doesn't have millions of dollars to spend on a second passport, Panama's a great option. It's become slightly less, but it's still good. It's still better than a lot of the other places, especially compared to what's going on in Europe right now. And that is a nightmare. Socialism has just taken over the entire continent. It's like a disease. So, yeah, man, I wish I had better news. This is kind of a sad episode. Not really, but it's like, you know how it is. Yeah. These things, a lot of problems at the world at the moment. I hope that people take this stuff seriously, get their head out of the sand.
Yeah, no, I agree. And honestly, I think that, I was on Facebook or something, and I think it was Robert Kiyosaki was talking about a crash, and someone's like, worse than what's already happened? I'm like, what's already happened? I mean, they're still keeping this thing propped up. You're like, you have no clue. This is completely unsustainable and crazy. And it's a
house of cards, man. It's a house of cards.
Yeah, and I never thought that. Like I said, I've been thinking this. It's a house of cards for a while, but I didn't realize that at the same time you can, at the same time you can pull out that whole financial structure. You can keep people from opening small businesses, and you can keep people from leaving their house or whatever, so they can't pick up the pieces. Because that's what's great about human beings, is that even if there's a big crash, it's not the end of the world. Or, if there's a changing in regime or whatever, human beings are very resilient and we can just pick up the pieces and get going. But if you do that at the same time, you shut everybody inside and control them like that, then it can be a really bad thing. So again, not,
and stop them from getting vitamin D, which we know regulates hormones and affects mood. And then you make it so that they can't have human interaction with other people. And even when they do go out of their cells, outside, you cover their faces, which is such an important indicator of someone's thoughts and feelings. You don't know if this person coming towards you means you threat or if they want to give you a hug. I mean, it just messes with people's brains. Like, I am so lucky. I mean, I'm so lucky to have a family and a beautiful wife, and I just have not taken these lockdowns seriously at all. Like, I've been going out. I'm not wearing a mask. I'm going out drinking with my buddies and having fun and smoking cigars. And I mean, I feel really bad for people who have been locked in an apartment by themselves, afraid of an invisible disease that, in most cases is not that dangerous. Like, I'm so sorry, but it's just trust the science. But the science is telling us masks don't work and these lockdowns are ridiculous. So
no, I 100% agree. Over here, just to let people know, I mean, where I am, I don't want to get into all of it. I've gone over this in some live streams and stuff like that, kind of the whole dynamic of it. But basically, there are places that have more mask wearing and those that have less, usually the bigger cities. It's not, especially outside, it's not, they're not going to tell you to put one on or anything like that. As far as masks go, I mean, with a couple of weeks ago, I did a road trip and I went to Tequila, Sayulita, Puerto Vallarta, Guadalajara, and then back here. The only time I wore a mask the whole time was in the Jose Cuervo factory. They made you put it as you're walking in and do this little tour. And then we were doing tastings in the back and it all came off. Yeah. So, and even then I just put it like on my chin. So, it's pretty open here. And as far as, shutting down small business, that really, there was maybe a month where it was kind of like that. But for the most part now, things are very open. And I just think that there's a lot of places, especially when you get outside of the city and the campos and stuff like that. And there's a lot of indigenous communities in Mexico that don't even follow the federal government, anything that they say. So, I don't think that, that type of thing is going to affect here as much. And there's a lot of kind of a growing middle class. So that's just to let people know kind of my experience with Mexico.
I read a statistic the other day that said that there are more Americans leaving the United States and migrating to Mexico than there are Mexicans migrating to the United States.
Yeah, that's a claim that's been made for a long time. The problem with that is that we don't know the people that are going into the United States from Mexico. We don't know. I mean, the ones that are going illegally. So it's hard to count. They still don't know how many people illegally live in the United States. And, almost all people from there's also another kind of a thing that people say is that most people that live in Mexico, they live here illegally. That's not true. Most people that come down, they're on a tourist visa, which is not illegal. They are trying to change that to make more people compliant because they want people to pay for a residency and they want people on the books instead of doing the tourist visa thing, although it's worked well for a long time. But anyways, there are a lot of people coming down. I don't know, as far as going up and coming down, I still think that there's a lot of people that in Latin America have this idea of what life is like in the US and a lot of them aren't even, dirt poor. They just think, oh, well, I can go up there and, I don't know, I'm going to make a ton of money and I can buy a Mercedes and go to California and they see all the movies. And, you know, I try to tell locals, people that I know that are considering doing that. I'm like, it's not a good idea. I mean, it's not what you think it is. You know, you're much better off in a place where you have a network, you have your family, you speak the language, and just try to start a business here. And I mean, I know you think they hear stories about people going over there and making all this money, but there's a lot of people that are, you know, from Latin America, and they go up there and they're just working their ass off. They're probably sharing, you know, their house with a bunch of other people, and it's just living, you know, maybe they end up living under a bridge or something, you know, like we see in California and other places, even in Austin, places like this. And so, yeah, I just, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, for a quality of life, it's better down here, especially if you can do online income, which is what we talk about. So great. So, yeah, let's wrap this up. Is there any other than your podcast? I mean, what other things do you want to for people to check out your stuff?
Check out my book. If you go to Amazon, you can pick it up. It's called Expat Secrets: How to Pay Zero Taxes, Live Overseas, and Make Giant Piles of Money. Super humble title. I know I'm a humble kind of guy. That's how I roll. It's good, man. I think that's between that and the podcast, the Expat Money Show, you'll find me there. I'm on Twitter a lot. We run a private group, Facebook group, which you are a member of, at expatmoneyforum.com, where we share lots of cool stuff, lots of stories, everybody helping each other. It's become a really good place over the last few months for a lot of networking. So that's been fun at expatmoneyforum.com.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, and we'll keep in touch.
Nice one. Thanks, James.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.